Hi. My name is Ava. At my baby's baptism, my husband punched me in front of everyone and screamed, "That baby isn't mine." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, holding the silence like it was armor. What none of them knew, his mother, his sister, even him, was that I already had the DNA results. I already knew what I was walking into. They called me a liar, erased me from the family photo, stole my name from church records, and tried to rewrite my son's identity. But the truth? It doesn't vanish. It waits. And when it came out, he fell to his knees. Do you know what it's like to be accused of betraying your family, by the very people who are betraying you? The morning sun in Sacramento felt too bright for a Sunday brunch, the kind of light that made everything look more perfect than it was. Marla's house sat in a manicured neighborhood lined with trimmed lawns and quiet driveways, her version of paradise. I remember parking at the curb, fixing Caleb's blanket, and telling myself to breathe before walking in. 2 months from now we'd celebrate his baptism, and I thought maybe this brunch could be a small step toward peace. I should have known better. Inside, the smell of polished wood and cinnamon muffins filled the air. Marla was arranging tulips, her pearls resting neatly above a beige blouse. "You're late," she said, not looking at me. I wasn't late, I was 5 minutes early. But Marla measured time by obedience, not clocks. Gideon came over and took Caleb from my arms. "Mom's just nervous," he whispered, like that would soften her edges. We sat around her long oak table. Callista glowed in a floral dress that probably cost more than our mortgage payment. She was 6 months pregnant and every sentence started with something about her journey. Marla beamed at her, asking about vitamins, nursery colors, and baby names. When she finally looked at me, it was only to ask if I'd wiped Caleb's face after feeding. I smiled, practiced and polite. "Yes, Marla. He's clean." She nodded, then added, "Good. It's important for babies to look well cared for." Her tone made it sound like she was grading me. The meal stretched. Small talk, fake laughs, the clink of silverware filling what no one wanted to say. When Marla stood and suggested a family photo, everyone rose instantly, everyone except me, who hesitated just long enough for her to notice. Gideon took the camera, Callista fixed her hair, and I held Caleb close, praying he wouldn't fuss. After the flash, I heard it. Marla leaned toward one of her friends, her voice low but sharp enough to cut through the air. "He's got a strange look, don't you think? Like the Hendersons next door." I froze. The Hendersons? Their skin tone, their hair, she wasn't subtle. My stomach turned. I looked at Gideon, but he didn't flinch. He laughed at something Callista said instead. No one corrected Marla. No one defended me. I smiled, the kind that hurt. Inside, something cracked. I told myself not to make a scene, not here, not now. I'd learned from years of being the youngest daughter, the one who kept the peace. But peace can suffocate you if you're the only one holding it. After dessert, Marla brought out 2 boxes wrapped in gold paper. "A small gift for the mothers," she said, handing one to Callista first. Inside was a high-end baby monitor with temperature sensors and built-in lullabies. "You'll need it for the little angel," she said. Callista squealed, showing it off. Then Marla turned to me and handed over my box. Lighter, smaller. I opened it to find a worn baby blanket, folded carefully but still bearing a faint laundry tag. "It's secondhand," Marla said. "I'm all for sustainable parenting." The room chuckled. Even Gideon smiled awkwardly. I forced another smile. "Thank you," I said, voice steady, because breaking down would only give her what she wanted. But as everyone laughed, I felt something shift in me. A quiet record of wrongs began forming in the back of my mind, one I knew I'd revisit later. The afternoon dragged. Talk drifted to Callista's social media following, the baby shower she was planning, the color scheme Marla adored. Every sentence drew a line between them and me. By the time Gideon suggested we leave, my face ached from pretending. On the drive home, Caleb slept in his car seat, his tiny hand gripping the edge of his blanket. I kept one hand on his chest, feeling his steady breathing, while Gideon talked about how nice the brunch had been. "Mom's just old-fashioned," he said. "Don't take it personally." "Old-fashioned?" I repeated softly. "She compared our son to the neighbors, Gideon." He sighed, eyes fixed on the road. "You're overreacting." She didn't mean it that way. That night, after putting Caleb down, I stood by his crib watching the rise and fall of his chest. The glow from the baby monitor painted soft circles on the wall. I opened my journal, one I hadn't touched since my pregnancy, and started writing. Not about feelings, but facts. Dates, times, words. Who said what, who laughed. I wrote, "Marla, he looks like the Hendersons." Gideon, no response. Then another line, "Gift, used blanket." I wasn't planning revenge. I was documenting truth. Because truth has a way of saving you when no one else will. In the quiet, I thought about my family, my older sisters who always outshined me, the way my parents called me the peacemaker. I'd married Gideon believing I'd finally found someone who saw me. But lately, his eyes looked past me, searching for something that wasn't there. Or maybe something he thought shouldn't be. It wasn't the words that hurt most. It was how they looked at Caleb, as if love required proof. Midnight crept in. I went through the drawer, pulling out hospital papers, ultrasound prints, vaccination records. I stacked them neatly inside a folder labeled Caleb, birth records. Then I added one more item, a blank page. A reminder that I'd start writing the rest of this story myself. Before turning off the light, I looked at my reflection in the window. The woman staring back didn't look fragile. She looked ready. Ready to stop being the one everyone underestimated. Ready to stop asking for space and start taking it. "If they want to question who I am," I whispered, sliding the folder into the bottom drawer, "I'll show them exactly who I've become." If they wanted to question who I was, I'd show them exactly who I'd become. That thought followed me for 2 long weeks. I carried it like a secret between my ribs, invisible but heavy. Life didn't stop, it never does, but something about our home had gone quiet in ways that noise couldn't fill. Gideon still came home on time, still kissed Caleb on the forehead, still said goodnight, but there was a gap in every gesture, a missing warmth I couldn't name out loud. I noticed the first crack one night when he scrolled through his phone while I fed Caleb. For months he'd posted photos of our son, Caleb's first smile, his tiny socks, a video of him sneezing that got hundreds of likes. Lately, those posts were gone. He'd even deleted some. When I asked, he said he was taking a break from social media. But he still liked every post his sister made. He stopped calling Caleb little man. Now it was just him, said in a flat tone that felt like an eraser. When Marla called in the evenings, he'd step outside or lower his voice. I'd catch fragments, words like proof and timing. When I'd enter the room, he'd hang up fast, pretend to check emails. One night I walked in quietly and heard her say, "You can't ignore what's right in front of you, Gideon." He didn't argue. He said, "I know, Mom." That was the moment the room chilled. I realized I was no longer a wife in his story, I'd become an exhibit. Days passed in strange rhythm. He'd go to work, come home, eat dinner, watch TV beside me in silence. I'd talk about Caleb's new habit of trying to roll over, but his eyes stayed on the screen. "That's nice," he'd say, without looking. I told myself maybe he was tired, stressed. Maybe I was overthinking. But deep down, I knew stress doesn't make a man forget his child's laugh. One evening, after putting Caleb to sleep, I noticed light spilling from under the door of Gideon's office. I walked closer, careful not to wake the baby. Through the crack, I saw the wall covered in ultrasound photos, dozens of them. Each one pinned and circled with a pen. My handwriting marked the dates, but beside them he'd added notes: nose shape, jawline, too early to tell. My heart thudded in my chest. He sat at the desk, studying one of the pictures under a lamp, comparing it to a baby photo of himself. I stepped inside. "What are you doing?" He startled but didn't hide it. "Just looking," he said. "At what?" He ran a hand through his hair. "I don't see me in him. That's all." For a second I couldn't breathe. I wanted to shout, to throw every photo at him, but I didn't. Instead, I said quietly, "He's 3 months old, Gideon. He barely looks like himself yet." He shrugged, eyes back on the paper. "I'm just being realistic." I turned and left. My hands were steady, but something deep inside me cracked open. It wasn't just doubt anymore, it was accusation without courage to say it out loud. A week later, I found the envelope. I was cleaning under the couch when my hand brushed against it, white, crumpled, half-torn. It looked like junk mail at first, but the clinic logo caught my eye. Inside was an appointment confirmation for a DNA test. The name on it was mine. The signature, though, wasn't. It was close enough that someone might believe it. But I recognized the difference instantly. The loop in the A, the slant in the V. I'd signed my name 1,000 times, this wasn't mine. My stomach twisted. I compared it against one of our mortgage papers. The handwriting matched Gideon's. I sat down on the couch, the paper trembling in my hand. I stared at it until the words blurred. Then, without thinking, I took out my phone and photographed it from every angle. I saved the images to a hidden folder labeled insurance. When Gideon came home that night, dinner was on the table, chicken and rice, his favorite. I waited until he'd poured himself a drink before sliding the envelope across the counter. "Found this under the couch," I said. He frowned, opened it, then froze for just a moment too long. "Oh, that. It's just a precaution," he said quickly. "A precaution for what?" He set the paper down carefully, like it might explode. "You're being defensive, Ava. If there's nothing to hide, why does it bother you?" I stared at him, searching for any trace of the man who once promised me that trust was the core of love. All I saw was distance. "Because you forged my name," I said. He didn't deny it. He just looked away. "You're overreacting." I laughed, quiet and bitter. "No, Gideon. I'm reacting exactly as a wife should when her husband turns her into a suspect." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The silence stretched until it felt like we were on opposite sides of a cliff. I gathered the envelope and tucked it back into my folder. "You've made your choice," I said finally. "Now let's see what it costs." That night, after he went to bed, I sat in the dim light of the kitchen with my laptop. I didn't know what I was searching for, but my fingers typed "Family Law Attorney Sacramento" before I realized it. I wrote down 3 numbers, folded the note, and placed it inside the same drawer where I'd kept Caleb's records. I wasn't ready to call anyone. Not yet. But knowing the numbers were there steadied me. I opened the folder labeled Caleb, Birth Records. Beside it, I placed the photo of the forged signature. Then I started a new document titled Timeline. I wrote, Marla's calls. Gideon's tone. Ultrasounds on wall. Forged document. My pulse slowed with every word. Facts didn't lie. People did. It was past midnight when I finally stood up. The house was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the fridge. I walked into the bedroom. Gideon was asleep, his back turned to me. I looked at him for a long time, wondering how love could vanish so completely without a sound. I sat on the edge of the bed and whispered to the darkness, if you can lie on paper, I can fight with proof. I'd barely deleted Marla's contact from my phone when the front door clicked open without warning. No knock, no call, just the scrape of the key she never returned and the click of polished heels stepping into my living room like it still belonged to her. I was sitting on the couch with Caleb against my chest, nursing him in the quiet hum of the late morning. The curtains were drawn just enough to let in light, the kind that makes everything feel like it might be okay, until it's not. Marla didn't even look at me when she walked in. Her eyes went straight to Caleb. "He's still small," she said, scanning him like a product on a shelf. Then she reached into her purse, pulled out a small Amazon box, and placed it neatly on the counter like she was delivering a meal. Her voice was flat. "It's time to stop pretending." I didn't move. I just shifted Caleb slightly, keeping my hand on the back of his head. "What's this?" "You'll see," she said, already walking toward the dining room like she had something else to organize. I waited until she was out of earshot, then stood up slowly, walked over, and opened the box. A brand new DNA test kit. The kind you see on late-night commercials between reruns of crime shows. Inside, on top of the plastic packaging, was a handwritten note, Marla's slanted cursive, like a schoolteacher's, "Let's protect our family. Do what's right." I heard Gideon's car door close outside. A few seconds later, he entered through the same door his mother had used. He saw the open box and paused mid-step. "You knew she was bringing this?" I asked, not raising my voice. He didn't answer right away. Just walked over to the sink and poured himself a glass of water. I stood there, waiting. Finally, he said, "She thinks it's the only way to settle things." I held up the note, shaking it lightly between my fingers. "She doesn't think. She attacks. And you, what do you think, Gideon?" He didn't meet my eyes. "Maybe it'll give us peace." That word. Peace. As if dragging a knife through my motherhood would make anything more peaceful. I placed the note back in the box, closed the lid, and looked him square in the face. "You bought the wrong kit," I said. "Mine comes with fire." I walked past him and went upstairs to change Caleb, my heart thudding slow and heavy. For the rest of the day, I stayed busy. I folded laundry. I cleaned the kitchen. I made a list for the baptism reception, one Marla had insisted on managing. She'd already chosen the menu, the flower arrangements, even the color of the baptismal gown. She said white was too basic and insisted on ivory. I didn't argue. I saved my energy. Every time she referred to Caleb, it was the child, like she couldn't even bring herself to say his name. I corrected her each time, gently but firmly. "It's Caleb," I'd say. "Not the child." She'd blink like she hadn't heard, then move on. A few days later, I drove to the church alone to preview the baptism setup. I wanted to double-check the reserved seating and confirm the sound system for the reading I planned. It was a warm, crisp morning, the kind that made Sacramento feel more like spring than summer. Inside the sanctuary, the light poured through the stained glass windows. I walked toward the altar where the welcome sign for the baptism was already on display. And then I froze. Printed in bold, clean font, the sign read, "Baby Jackson, son of Gideon and Callista." My stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. I turned to the woman arranging flowers near the front row. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That name, it's wrong." She looked at the sign, then smiled politely. "Oh, the names were submitted by the grandmother earlier this week." I nodded once, thanked her, and left the sanctuary without another word. Back in the car, I sat with the engine running, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned pale. Callista. Marla. Which one submitted it didn't matter anymore. It was deliberate. Not an accident. Not a typo. A message. You don't belong here. Back home, I put Caleb down for a nap, poured myself a glass of water, and opened my laptop. I pulled up the scanned copy of his birth certificate, printed a fresh copy, and typed a cover letter to the church's administrator. Subject: correction of baptismal records, urgent. I attached the documents and CC'd both the priest and my lawyer's general inbox. I wrote with calm precision, every sentence a brick in a wall I was building between myself and their chaos. Then I called the church office. I didn't shout or plead. I spoke clearly and slowly, explained the situation, and asked for written confirmation that the name would be corrected before the ceremony. "We're so sorry for the confusion," the secretary said, her voice genuinely warm. "Yes, we'll update the signage and program immediately." "Thank you," I replied. "And please confirm when it's done. I'd like it in writing." That night, I saved the church's email response in a special folder. I backed it up to the cloud and emailed a copy to my personal address. I even printed a hard copy and placed it in the drawer with Caleb's other records. I didn't tell Gideon. I didn't need to. I deleted Marla's number from my phone. The silence felt like victory. She's not the only one who can write a name. Recording. That's how I began the morning of Caleb's baptism, thumb hovering over the red button on my phone, heart steadier than expected. I'd planned for everything: backup clothes, spare bottle, even an extra pacifier tucked into my coat pocket. What I couldn't plan for was how it would feel to walk into a church knowing half the people there thought my son wasn't mine to claim. We arrived just before noon. The church lot was already full, the walkway lined with women in pastels and men straightening ties. I adjusted Caleb's cap gently, kissed his forehead, and stepped out of the car without waiting for Gideon to open the door. He didn't offer, anyway. Inside, the sanctuary gleamed with polished wood and soft light filtering through stained glass. Marla stood near the front pew, talking to the priest like she owned the altar. Callista was nearby, posing with her husband for a photo someone was already uploading. The tension in my chest tightened, but I held Caleb closer. He stirred, eyes wide, cheeks round and warm against my skin. No one could take this from me. Not today. The ceremony started. The priest welcomed everyone with the usual warmth and authority. When he said Caleb's full name, Caleb Michael Jackson, I caught Marla stiffen. She didn't speak, but her silence roared. The name had survived her edits. I made sure of that. Halfway through the prayer, I felt a shift beside me. Gideon's body tensed, his jaw set like a clenched fist. I turned slightly toward him, but before I could ask anything, his hand moved, quick and sharp. He snatched Caleb from my arms. "You really think I'm that stupid?" he hissed through clenched teeth. His voice was low but venomous. "Gideon, don't." Before I finished, his fist met the side of my face. It wasn't just pain, it was the sound. The thud against my cheek echoed through the church louder than any hymn. I stumbled back, one hand reaching for the pew to steady myself. Someone gasped. Someone else dropped their program. But no one stepped forward. "Liar," he shouted. "That baby isn't mine." Silence followed. Not a single voice rose in my defense. Not the priest, not Callista, not even Lowell, who sat 2 rows back with his eyes on the floor. The weight of 100 stares pressed down on me like a collapsing roof. I straightened. My cheek burned. My ears rang. But my spine held. Caleb was crying now, wailing in Gideon's arms like even he knew something had gone terribly wrong. I reached out for him, but Gideon turned his back. I didn't ask again. I walked, step by step, down the aisle, past whispers and frozen faces. Someone mumbled, "Is she okay?" but no one stopped me. I didn't go to my car. I found a restroom tucked behind the hall. I locked the door, leaned over the sink, and stared at myself in the mirror. Red. Swollen. The edge of my lip split just slightly. I dabbed water on my face. Not to clean the blood, but to feel something colder than the judgment I'd just left behind. "This is not where I end," I whispered. I left the church without waiting for Gideon or Marla. Caleb's diaper bag was still in my car, packed with enough to get through the next 24 hours. That's all I needed for now. By the time I reached home, the sun had started to set. Shadows stretched across the floor as I changed out of the beige dress and folded it carefully into a plastic bag. I didn't want to see it again, but I didn't want to throw it away either. It felt like evidence. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram. Callista had posted. I opened it out of instinct. The photo was at the altar: Gideon, Marla, Callista, her husband, even Lowell tucked at the edge of the frame. Caleb was in Gideon's arms, red-faced and squirming. I was nowhere in the picture. Cropped clean. The caption read, "So proud of our growing family. Baby Jackson blessed today, 2 hearts." I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I stared at the image until the edges blurred, until my breathing evened out again. They were trying to erase me. Not just from the photo, but from the narrative. From the title of mother. From the moment that should have been mine. That night, while Caleb slept, I packed a go bag. Just enough for a few nights. I didn't know where I'd go, not yet. But I needed the option. I needed to know I could move if they came for more. I wrote a note and folded it inside my journal. If they erased me, I'll make myself undeniable. Then I opened a clean notepad on my phone. Labeled it Truth. I listed everything. DNA kit on the counter. Baptism name change. Forged appointment. Marla's voice. The punch. The photo. Then I set 3 alarms for the next morning: 8 o'clock lawyer. 9:30, OBGYN records. 11 o'clock audio backup. It was nearly 2 in the morning when I sat back and looked around the room. My cheek still ached. But the fear had morphed into something else. Resolve. I glanced down at my sleeve. There was a faint smear of dried blood near the cuff. I rolled it up, then picked up my phone and tapped the red circle. Recording. This is how you bury a lie. I paused, eyes on the blinking light. In the truth. The morning after the baptism smelled like rain and bleach. I woke to the hum of the washer finishing a load I didn't remember starting. My cheek still ached when I touched it, a fading reminder that truth had a price. Caleb was stirring in his crib, soft breaths, tiny fists tucked close. I lifted him, kissed the curve of his head, and felt my heart settle just enough to face another day. The phone rang before I could make coffee. Callista's name lit the screen. For a moment, I thought of letting it go to voicemail. Then I answered. "Hey, sis," she said, her voice sugar-sweet, the kind of tone that always came before bad news. "Just wanted to check in. Hope you're feeling okay after everything yesterday." After everything. That's what she called it. Not the punch. Not the scene. Just everything. "I'm fine," I said flatly, holding the phone between my shoulder and ear as I poured water into the coffee machine. These things can really get out of hand, you know? Emotions, family, people say things they don't mean. Do they? I asked quietly. A pause. "Well, I just wanted you to know we're praying for you." "Appreciate that," I said, and hung up before she could sanctify the conversation any further. I stood there for a long time, watching the coffee drip into the pot. The smell filled the air, warm and bitter. I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through my messages. I opened one from Tessa Line, my best friend since college, the one person who'd always told me the truth, even when I didn't want to hear it. I typed, "I need to talk." She replied 5 minutes later, "Ava, I can't be involved in this. I hope you understand." No call. No explanation. Just distance disguised as sympathy. I set the phone down, staring at the reflection of my face in the black screen. Betrayal doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it arrives quietly, dressed like concern. The afternoon crawled by. Gideon hadn't come home. I didn't expect him to. He'd probably gone to Marla's, where the story was being rewritten one whisper at a time. Caleb napped. I folded his clothes, one tiny piece at a time. The rhythm of it calmed me, until the knock on the door broke it. When I opened it, Callista stood there holding a pink box of cupcakes. "Peace offering," she said cheerfully, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I didn't know we were at war," I replied, closing the door behind her. She laughed, that rehearsed sound she used in her videos. "Oh, don't be like that. Mom's just protective." Protective. I bit the inside of my cheek. Of what, exactly? Family reputation. You know how she is. Callista shrugged and placed the cupcakes on the counter. She leaned over the crib where Caleb slept. "He's adorable," she whispered. Then, almost playfully, "You never really know who babies will end up looking like, huh?" I felt every muscle in my body tighten. She smiled at me, waiting. "Just teasing," she added quickly. I smiled back. "Of course." She talked for another 10 minutes about the church, about how embarrassed she was for me, about how she hoped time would heal things. I nodded at all the right moments, my voice polite, my heart stone. When she finally left, I locked the door and stood still in the quiet. The smell of frosting clung to the air. I walked to the laundry room and started folding again. One of Caleb's shirts had a faint brown stain near the hem. It took me a moment to remember, it was from the blood that had dried on my hand after the punch. I held the tiny shirt in my palm. Then I folded it carefully, slid it into a manila envelope, and wrote in neat block letters, "Evidence." Just in case. I tucked it into the drawer with my other files. The folder was thicker now. Proof takes up space. The hours slipped by. The light changed from gold to gray to blue as night fell. The rain that had threatened all day finally began, tapping against the windows in slow rhythm. I fed Caleb, rocked him to sleep, then sat at the kitchen table again. The house felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that hums behind your ears. I opened my laptop and began typing a letter, short, sharp, and deliberate. "Gideon. If this escalates, I will not protect you from the truth. If you choose your mother again, I won't stand beside you. Ever." I stared at the words for a long moment before hitting send. The message showed as read at 9:16 p.m. No reply. I smiled to myself. Silence was its own confession. I poured a glass of water, stood by the window, and watched the rain streak down the glass. My reflection looked calmer than I felt. Outside, the streetlight flickered, and thunder rolled in the distance. "Then let the storm come," I whispered. I looked at the clock. Nearly 10. I picked up my phone and dialed my OB/GYN's office. "Hi, this is Ava Jackson," I said, voice steady. "I'd like copies of all my records, yes, everything from my pregnancy to Caleb's delivery. I'll pick them up myself." I hung up, opened my laptop again, and backed up every photo, message, and document. Insurance. Truth. Safety. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to control. Not pieces, peace was gone, but purpose. I walked to Caleb's room one last time. He was dreaming, mouth twitching into a faint smile. I smoothed the blanket over him, whispering softly, "No one's taking you from me." The storm outside cracked open, thunder echoing through the house. I didn't flinch. I'd learned that storms can clear the air just as easily as they destroy. The next morning came quietly, heavy clouds pressing low over the street like they were holding their breath. I sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee gone cold beside me, when my laptop pinged with a new email. The subject line read, "Confirmation of baby dedication donation." For a second, I thought it was spam. Then I saw the sender, the church's administrative office, and opened it. The message was polite, the kind you could tell had been copied and pasted many times before. Thank you to Callista and Marla Jackson for sponsoring the baby dedication event. Your generosity helps us serve our community. My name was nowhere. I blinked, reread, and felt that now familiar burn rise behind my ribs. I was the one who paid weeks ago, transferring the donation from our savings account while Gideon slept. I'd even sent the receipt to the church myself. I scrolled down to the attachment, a receipt showing Marla's name neatly printed at the top where mine used to be. Someone had rewritten history again. I pushed the chair back slowly and stood, my palms flat on the table. The sound of rain started against the windows, faint but steady. Caleb was in his playpen, giggling at the soft jingling toy above him. His laughter felt like both comfort and accusation. You let them keep doing this. I walked to the counter, opened my laptop again, and hit reply. My fingers moved before I could even think. Good morning, this must be a clerical mistake. The original donation receipt was issued under my name, Ava Jackson, on April 3rd. Please review your records. I've attached the original confirmation for reference. Then I sent it. Simple. Clean. No anger on the surface. It took less than 20 minutes for the reply to come back. Oh my goodness, Mrs. Jackson, I'm so sorry. This isn't the first time we've had issues with name changes in our files. It appears someone from the committee adjusted the donor list before print. We'll correct it immediately. I stared at the word adjusted. I didn't need them to say who. I already knew. Marla had friends in every corner of that church, the kind of friends who smiled at you from across the pew but answered her call before the second ring. I attached both receipts, took a screenshot, and forwarded everything to my lawyer's inbox with the subject-lined pattern of misrepresentation. Then I sat back and smiled, the kind of quiet smile that meant I wasn't scared anymore. By mid-afternoon, the rain had stopped, and the house fell into that hush that comes after long storms. I checked the baby monitor app out of habit. The video feed from Caleb's room was clear. But another folder caught my eye, saved recordings. It held clips from the baptism weekend. One file was longer than the rest. I tapped it open. The camera angle showed the guest room where Marla had stayed, the crib visible in the corner, a nightlight glowing dim. I hadn't realized the monitor recorded audio automatically. Marla's voice filled the speakers, sharp and certain. She doesn't know what's coming. We'll have him tested, and if it's not his, I'm taking her to court for full custody. My breath caught. I turned the volume up. A pause, then Callista's voice, low and uncertain. Mom, maybe that's too far. Marla cut her off. Too far is letting that woman lie her way into this family. The words slammed into me harder than Gideon's punch ever could. It wasn't about love or family. It was control. Ownership. She'd planned it. I listened again. Then again. Each time the words sank deeper, colder. I downloaded the file, renamed it Marla, Custody Threat Recording, and backed it up to 3 different drives. I emailed one copy to my private account and saved another to an encrypted folder. Then I took out a small USB stick, plugged it in, and copied the file there too. When I ejected it, I held it in my palm like a weapon. Because it was one. When Gideon came home that evening, I was ready. He stepped inside, shaking off his coat. You didn't answer my texts. I saw them. He sighed. Ava, please, I'm trying to. I turned the laptop toward him. The email from the church glowed on the screen beside the attached receipts. Below that, another tab waited, the audio file, time-stamped and saved. I don't think you're trying, I said quietly. You're hiding. He looked at the screen, jaw tightening. Where did you get this? I didn't have to look far. Your mother's voice found me. He said nothing. His silence had a shape now, like a wall he'd built between us and decorated with excuses. I clicked play. The room filled with Marla's voice again. Gideon flinched but didn't stop it. When it ended, I folded my arms. If you want to protect your mother, that's your choice. If you want to protect our son, now's the time to speak. He swallowed hard. I just need time to think. You've had time, I said, meeting his eyes. Now you need to act. He left the room without another word. I stayed there, watching the rain start again outside. Every drop hitting the window felt like punctuation. A statement. By the time the clock hit 9, I'd made my decision. I walked to the hallway closet, pulled out the suitcase I kept for emergencies, and began packing a second bag, one for Caleb. Diapers, formula, onesies, the small stuffed bear my mother had mailed from Oregon. I folded everything with precision, like order itself could keep me sane. I slid the USB stick into an envelope and sealed it shut. I wrote one word on the front in blue ink, truth. Then I placed it in the folder that had grown heavier each week. The house was quiet again. Gideon hadn't come back downstairs. Caleb shifted in his crib, making a small sound before drifting back into sleep. I stood at the window, my reflection ghosted against the night, and whispered to the dark, this time, I'll be the one rewriting history. I didn't hesitate to take the photo. Lowell's hand was steady as he passed it to me, his eyes fixed on Caleb, not Marla. Take this, he said. It's proof of what runs in our family, real blood, real strength. I nodded once, tucked the old photograph between the folds of Caleb's blanket, and walked out the door without a word. Outside, the air had cooled. Late afternoon sun filtered through the trees lining the edge of Marla's driveway. The light didn't feel warm. It felt like clarity. Like standing still after holding your breath too long. By the time I reached the car and strapped Caleb in, my mind was already turning. This wasn't over. Marla had set the stage thinking I'd crumble, but she forgot something important. When you corner a woman long enough, she stops flinching. That night, once Caleb had fallen asleep and the house was quiet, I gathered everything through photos, printouts, timestamps, voice recordings. I checked every file twice, organizing them in labeled folders. Then I sat at the dining table and opened the email from Marla. The one she'd sent under the guise of a peaceful family meeting, copied to Gideon and Callista, sweetly inviting everyone to find a path forward. It was time to answer. I didn't respond to the email. Instead, I texted Gideon directly. I'm coming. But not to reconcile. I'm bringing the truth. And a backup plan. He didn't reply. But I saw the read receipt flash gray. The next afternoon, I forwarded the email to my lawyer and added a note. If you don't hear from me by 9:30 p.m., call the police. Then I packed the diaper bag, added the USB drive labeled truth, and walked out the door. Marla's house looked exactly as it always did, perfect lawn, trimmed hedges, wreath on the door that matched the season. It was a face. Just like hers. Inside, the atmosphere was already thick. The sitting room was too quiet. Gideon stood by the window, pretending to check his phone. Callista sat stiffly on the couch, legs crossed, her posture tighter than usual. And Marla was seated at the head of the room like a judge. She gave me that usual smile, tight, gracious, and wholly insincere. I'm glad you came, Ava, she said. We need to talk like adults. For Caleb's sake. I kept my voice calm. You mean for control's sake? She waved the comment away, chuckling lightly. Let's just clear the air with love and truth, shall we? Then, like some rehearsed trick, she pulled a sleek white box from her side. A DNA kit. We all think Caleb deserves a stable, real family, she said. And that starts with knowing who he is. Gideon shifted in his seat but said nothing. Callista looked anywhere but at me. I nearly turned to leave. But I didn't. Instead, I reached into the diaper bag and pulled out the large photo I'd received from Lowell just the day before. It was old, faded at the corners, but the image was crystal clear. A baby, maybe 6 months old, with soft cheeks, deep-set eyes, and the exact same upward curl in the mouth that Caleb had when he slept. I walked to the coffee table and laid the photo down gently. Then I unwrapped Caleb from his blanket and placed him on my hip. The room was still. Lowell leaned forward. "That's my grandfather," he said softly. "And that baby looks just like Caleb." Marla blinked but didn't speak. I took another photo out, this one of Caleb and Gideon, taken before everything broke. I placed it beside the old one. Then I stepped back. Real blood. Real strength. It doesn't always show up where you expect it to. But it doesn't lie. For a moment, no one breathed. Then I pulled out my phone and tapped to cast a video to the TV across the room. The screen flickered, then lit up. My Aunt Eudora's voice came through the speakers. Marla's always projected. When her first pregnancy ended in a loss, she blamed Lowell. She hated weakness in anyone. That's what this is about. Control, not truth. The voice paused, crackling slightly in the recording. She's not protecting Gideon. She's protecting herself. Always has. When the screen went black again, the silence that followed was heavier than the words. Gideon finally looked up. His face pale, his mouth half open. "You recorded her?" "I protected my son," I said. "Something you were supposed to do." Callista stood abruptly. "I didn't know about any of this." "No," I said, calmly. "You just smiled through it." "That's worse." Marla's voice cut through, lower than before. "You went behind the family. You embarrassed all of us." I stepped closer, locking eyes with her. "You don't get to erase people because you're in pain." Then I turned to Gideon. "This was your last chance to stand with me. You didn't. So I'll stand alone." I picked up Caleb, pulled his blanket over his shoulder, and walked toward the door. No one followed. I had just reached for the doorknob when I heard Lowell's voice from behind me. "Wait." I turned. He stood up slowly, holding the old photo between his fingers. "Take this," he said, his voice full but soft. "It's proof of what runs in our family, real blood, real strength." I nodded, took the photo, and stepped into the cool evening light. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I walked to the car with my son in my arms and my head held higher than it had in months. Because I had brought the truth. And they had nothing left but silence. The photo Lowell gave me rested on the passenger seat, still warm from my hands. I glanced at it once more before I turned the key in the ignition. The baby in the photograph had Caleb's same round cheeks, same stubborn brows. That kind of resemblance doesn't ask permission, it announces itself. I drove in silence. Caleb, drowsy in his car seat, drifted into sleep as the sun settled behind the trees. The house we were headed to wasn't mine, wasn't Marla's, it was neutral ground. Lowell's. That was my condition. If Gideon wanted to talk one last time, it wouldn't be under his mother's roof. I pulled into the driveway at 6:15. The porch light had already flicked on. It cast long shadows across the sidewalk, making the front door look heavier than it should have. I stepped out, Caleb in my arms, the folder tucked under my coat. As I approached the house, I took one last breath, not to calm down, but to prepare. I wasn't walking into this to be heard. I was walking in to be understood. Gideon opened the door. His eyes scanned my face, then drifted to Caleb, then back again. "Thanks for coming," he said, like this was some casual dinner and not the end of everything. Inside, everyone was already there. Marla sat straight in the armchair she always claimed as hers, chin up, lips tight. Callista was beside her, avoiding eye contact. Lowell stood near the fireplace, arms crossed. No one spoke when I entered. I didn't offer pleasantries. I laid Caleb gently in the portable bassinet Lowell had set up for him near the sofa, then pulled the folder from beneath my coat and set it down on the coffee table. "This," I said, "is everything you've all tried to ignore." I opened it. First, the DNA results. 99.97% match between Caleb and Gideon. I slid the paper forward, let it rest for all of them to see. Marla didn't blink. Next, the printout of the baptism donation email, the one thanking her and Callista for a payment I had made. I circled the original transaction ID. "Stolen credit," I said flatly. Callista shifted uncomfortably. Then came the transcript. Marla's voice, recorded from the baby monitor. "She doesn't know what's coming. We'll have him tested. If he's not his, I'm taking her to court for full custody." I didn't play the audio. I didn't need to. The words on the page carried more weight in silence. Gideon reached out and picked up the paper. He read the line twice. His mouth opened like he had something to say, but nothing came. Finally, I placed the photograph between all of it, the baby photo of Lowell's grandfather, and a recent picture of Caleb sleeping. I didn't point out the similarities. I let them draw their own lines. "Truth doesn't yell," I said. "It just waits to be seen." The room was still. The kind of still that feels unnatural, like the world stopped breathing. Gideon broke the silence. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket and handed it to me. "I wrote this weeks ago," he said. "I didn't know how to give it to you." I opened it slowly. I wanted to believe you. But I was raised to listen to her voice before my own. I thought silence would keep me safe. I know now that silence is just another form of betrayal. I folded the letter back up, placed it on top of the DNA results, and looked him in the eye. Safety never saved anyone. Callista stood and walked toward the kitchen without a word. Marla reached for her purse, her eyes never meeting mine. She stood, straightened her coat, and walked out. No apology. No defense. Lowell moved from his spot near the fireplace and wrapped his arms gently around me. It was the first time he'd done that in years. "I knew," he whispered. "I knew the day he was born." I nodded but didn't speak. Gideon dropped to one knee beside the coffee table. Not to beg. Not to plead. But in a posture that said more than words could. "I destroyed us," he said. "I know." I didn't correct him. After a few minutes, I walked to Caleb's bassinet, lifted him gently, and wrapped him in the same blanket I'd packed weeks ago when I first considered leaving. Before I reached the door, I stopped. Turned. "This isn't about being right," I said. "It's about being whole." I stepped out into the cool air, Caleb pressed against my chest. The night was quiet, calm in a way I hadn't felt in months. As I reached the car and opened the door, I heard Gideon behind me. He didn't shout. He didn't plead. He just stood there, hands in his pockets. "You taught me to doubt myself," I said, not turning around. "Now I know better." I strapped Caleb in, shut the door, and drove away without looking back. I closed the car door slowly, the latch clicking shut with finality. Caleb's breath was warm against my chest as I strapped him in. I paused, one hand still resting on the car seat buckle, my eyes locked on the porch I had just walked away from. The porch where Gideon stood motionless. Where Marla had once ruled with icy precision. Where Callista had learned to smile while wounding you. The storm had passed. Not the one in the sky, but the one inside me. And yet, some part of it still rumbled quietly beneath my skin. It's been 3 months since that night. I now live in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Midtown Sacramento, close enough to the clinic to walk when the weather's good, far enough from everything else to breathe freely. There's no chandelier here, no curated furniture. Just a second-hand couch, a dining table I found on Craigslist, and peace. Most days are ordinary. I wake early, feed Caleb, dress him for the day, and pass him off to Nora, the retired teacher turned babysitter who lives across the hall. Then I walk to work at the clinic and let myself disappear into other people's needs. Wounds, checkups, new mothers trying to hold themselves together. I see parts of me in all of them. Caleb is teething now. He's drooling, giggling, biting everything within reach. When he laughs, really laughs, his nose scrunches just like Gideon's used to. It doesn't hurt to see that anymore. Somehow, it makes him more mine. Some nights, after Caleb is asleep, I sit on the balcony with a cup of mint tea and stare out at the blinking city. The lights here don't judge. They just shine. I think about Gideon sometimes. Not out of longing, but out of curiosity. About who he's becoming. About what he sees now when he looks at silence. The last time I saw him was the night I left Lowell's. He followed me to the driveway, but he didn't try to stop me. Just stood there, hands open, voice low. I failed you both. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Some words don't require echoing. Marla hasn't contacted me. Not a text. Not a call. Not even a forwarded church bulletin. A friend of a friend mentioned she stopped attending services altogether. No public apology. No breakdown. Just a disappearing act. When I heard that, I didn't feel triumph. I just said, let silence be her sentence. And I meant it. The bruises have faded, but not the reflexes. Sometimes I still flinch when someone raises their hand too fast. Or when a stranger stares at Caleb a little too long in the grocery store. There are nights I wake up gasping, echoes of the word liar bouncing around the corners of my memory. But those moments pass. And when they do, I look at Caleb warm, healthy, whole, and I whisper to him, you were always enough. The therapist I started seeing calls it anchoring. I call it truth. The rest of the world might question timelines and features, blood types and last names, but I know what it means to rock a child to sleep after a day full of slander. I know what it feels like to stand alone in a room and not shake. 1 week ago, Caleb turned 1. We didn't throw a party. Just the two of us. I baked a tiny banana cake, let him smash it to pieces with both hands, and took 100 pictures. I didn't post them. I didn't need to. Later that night, after I gave him a warm bath and changed him into new pajamas, my phone buzzed. One new message. Happy birthday, Caleb. I miss you. Always here if you need me. Gee. I sat on the couch for a long time, holding the phone in one hand and Caleb's footed onesie in the other. I didn't delete the message. I didn't respond either. I just set the phone down, walked into Caleb's room, and kissed his forehead. We're okay. That night, after he drifted to sleep, I pulled out my journal and flipped to the very last page. The ink from previous entries had bled through, but there was still enough space for one more sentence. I wrote. Healing isn't loud. It's quiet, steady, and always earned. And finally, I hear myself again. Then I closed the book. There is no next chapter. This is the beginning of mine, on my own terms. Sometimes, the loudest strength is found in silence, and the most powerful revenge is truth, served cold and without apology. Ava didn't need to scream, fight, or prove herself with words. She let the evidence speak, and it did louder than any accusation thrown her way. Have you ever been doubted by the people who were supposed to protect you? What would you do if your own family turned against you? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. We've got more powerful real-life stories coming.